Welcome. Hello. Welcome. Get started in just a moment here with this fun live podcast. In the meantime, if you'd love to comment where you're listening from, that would be fun to see in the chat today. And I'll start with a brief update since that's sort of the podcast flow here. I feel like I'm out of the podcast flow a little bit. So we've been in Hawaii now for, I don't know, 6 weeks already, 6 weeks. And there's so much to say about that. But on the very practical level, we've just been adapting and checking things out and learning how things work here and adapting to the time difference. There's so many really basic changes from Kentucky to this magical island. So I have not been a regular podcaster lately, although I hope to sort of get back on that in the next little bit, hopefully sooner than later. We have an Indie Birth Answering the Call retreat here in about 3 weeks or so. And that's another exciting thing happening here. So I may wait till the retreat's over since the weekend of teaching is really intense. I'm so excited to meet the women that are coming, though, from all over to explore radical midwifery with me and the path. And perhaps once we get into October, then I will commit to a more regular podcast schedule. But it's been fun doing these lives if you've caught any, or maybe you're listening later as a podcast, which isn't any different than on that side of things. But doing it live enables me to obviously connect a little bit more, see where people are from. So I see lots of places on the map already, and also just engage more spontaneously, obviously, with questions or topics that you have going along with what I'm talking about. So it's so nice to have you all here. Idaho, Wisconsin, Utah, New York, California, Washington, Texas, Canada, Tennessee. So many states being represented right now. And I guess we'll see how this time, like the time I chose for this, works out. Seems like it's working for those of you that are here. I know it's like 8 p.m. on the East Coast right now, the US, which is still so crazy. I still am not quite used to it. It's only 2 p.m. here. So I feel like my day is always nice and slow compared to that. But trying a new time in hopes that it works for more people than not. All right. That wasn't too much of an update. I don't know that there's too much more to say right now, but I do want to just have fun today talking about the postpartum time and all of the intricacies and layers that I think to talk about today. There's so many. There's so many. I also want to talk about our new course called Mothering the Mother for those of you that are interested in learning more overall for yourself, for your own children, for your sisters, for your nieces, and those of you that maybe are already on the path to birth work. Maybe you're a student midwife, maybe you're a doula, a birth doula, and you're really wanting to perhaps focus in on this very special part of life that we call postpartum. That word is so funny, I think, in very modern times, right? Postpartum is sometimes people, sometimes it's something people don't understand. I've had lots of women in the younger generations, think postpartum meant postpartum depression, like kind of like a slang for postpartum depression. That was kind of new to me because postpartum literally means, right, after birth. And there are other ways. So postnatal would maybe be a more pleasing word. I think we can just say after birth. It is the time after birth, and that can mean anything from the hour after birth to the first year after birth, right? So postpartum is huge. It's like you're kind of biting off more than you can chew in a sense when you decide to embark on this path of supporting women in that place because it is just really extensive. And although birth is really unique from one woman to the next, right? We don't all have the same births, they're different lengths, we all experience it differently. Postpartum time, the time after baby, has even more variation in the physical, in the mental and emotional, in the spiritual. And then, we have this new being in the family, we have this new soul. How is that soul integrating into their life experience here on earth? How are the rest of the family members doing? How are they integrating with this new soul, with this new baby? So it no longer is just about one woman and her body and this baby. It becomes about an entire family. And when that ripples out, right? Like when that little microcosm is disturbed in that family because postpartum is so layered and it can be rough and chaotic and all the things, then you're looking at, communities and places and cities and the world really that is kind of out of sorts. And I don't necessarily think that fixing everyone's postpartum experience is A, reasonable, or B, that it would completely change the paradigm in which we live. But I'm fairly sure that supporting women better in their postpartum, supporting families better and more thoroughly would change the experience of, again, that family and then a community, perhaps. And that little by little over time, over decades, as we remember this information, because that's largely what we're doing, we're remembering it. That does change the world. That does change the paradigm. That does change the reality that we create. So instead of supporting this reality that many people live in, where women in particular are, overworked, they're overmothered, they don't have support, they're barely done healing from birth before they're out in the world taking care of their families again. Until we address that and really teach families and women how to care for themselves, and we can also help with that support, then there isn't going to be a huge shift in the way that we mother. And the way that we mother does change the world. We are responsible for these next generations coming forward. So that's the bigger view with postpartum care, just like birth. And this is just how I feel about birth, of course, that each individual is so important, but something in the overall energy of how we approach these initiations has to shift for there to be bigger change, for it to be bigger than, oh, that one woman had a really great birth, right? We want every woman to feel in her postpartum like she's a goddess, like she's been fully supported and loved and understood and able to navigate the challenges of being a mother. That woman will emerge strong and confident, and therefore that will affect her children and what comes next. So if that isn't a great lead in to just what the postpartum is and why it's so important, I don't know what is. I was reflecting this week on my second postpartum time, and I'll share a little bit about this with you because I think it really is part of this story of why we developed this course and why I may personally offer postpartum services kind of as my midwifery care here on Oahu. I may do that come January. I'm not going to births, and I really have like gotten the fire lit within myself to serve women in this deep, deep way. But where did it all start for me? Well, my first birth, as many of you know, happened in the hospital. There was zero postpartum care. I think we know that. So I won't harp on it. If you've had a hospital birth, if you're a doula, you know women are sent home. There is no support, there is no instruction. I mean, if anything, right, they come back to the doctor's office for a weird physical check of what I don't really know, and they're sent on their way. There's no education during the pregnancy. And the focus in that mainstream medical model is really only physical. So, is her body working again? Is the baby gaining weight? Like, they're very practical things that are looked for to assess health or how well this mom and baby are doing together. And of course, they're very superficial. There are a million other layers beyond, is a baby gaining weight? And, is a mother's body healed? What does that even mean? Then is addressed in that model. So that was my first postpartum. I had no idea. Did I rest? No. Did I know about the right foods to eat or how to take care of my postpartum body? No. Did I know anything about babies or baby care, really? No. Did I have support breastfeeding? No. So, in a million ways, I didn't really have a postpartum. I really didn't. I got back to life and I brought my baby with me. There wasn't a sense of, wow, I did it. I had this baby. What is life now? Who am I now? There were no big questions that I really asked myself because I just didn't know that that was possible. So I can't really speak more to how I healed or didn't heal. I just kind of moved on through life. And I have moments of regret about that for sure, but it also was perfect because it set me up for wanting to do better, even though I didn't know that at the time. My second birth was almost to the day 19 years ago. So we have a birthday this week. My son Egan will be 19 on the equinox, and he was our first home birth. And his birth, of course, was completely different. He was born at home in water. That was great. It was peaceful for the most part. But postpartum care, once again, I knew nothing. I hadn't been with the midwife long enough. I had only hired her a couple of weeks before the birth. And truly, even if I hadn't, I don't think there was much postpartum education at that time from that midwife. And again, I just had no idea. Well, the wake up call came when I developed pretty severe mastitis or a breast infection on my, I don't know, I want to say third day postpartum. I had already been out, if you can believe that. I had already been out to lunch with a friend. Totally crazy. But I understand why women do that when they're not educated because I really felt fine at that time. I had had a pretty easy birth compared to the first. I was high on adrenaline, my first home birth. It was exhilarating, it was fabulous. I didn't know that there would be a crash. I didn't know that at the third or fourth day postpartum, when all the hormones change and the adrenaline really chills out and you settle into your body, it's a very humbling and often raw experience. And I hadn't really noticed that the first time. So with the second baby, I was humbled. It was extremely painful. And looking back, I didn't do too much different other than rest and maybe some herbs. And I hadn't really gotten the message, right? I hadn't really learned that I was doing too much, that there is a way of life, that there is an energy shift with the postpartum. And I think that's something that with our course, Mothering the Mother, we're really trying hard to communicate to those of you that want to learn this, that want to, train to be in this role of postpartum care, that we must understand what that energy shift is before the mom even knows it's happened. If she just had her first baby, or if she's like me and had her second baby and just has no recollection of the first postpartum, really, then we have to be ready for what we know generally happens. And of course, women are different. We're all unique. We don't all do things, we don't all have these same exact things happen on exactly the same day or moment. But as a midwife that has supported hundreds of women through the postpartum, I can tell you that there is a pretty clear map for most of us. It doesn't mean we don't have our own like diversions off the map down little rabbit holes of, like I said, maybe mastitis or maybe it's birth trauma and we have kind of more to deal with. But the general physical, emotional, spiritual map is very similar from woman to woman. And there's so much that goes into holding that energy, holding the energy of all of these shifts with an open heart and open mind. Whatever's going to come up for this mom is fine. But we have the experience and the knowledge to hold that. So, for some women, having a really rough time at about that third or fourth day postpartum, there's nothing to do. It's simply an awareness of this is where the body is at, this is where the mind is at. How are you sleeping, right? Probably not a lot. How's the baby nursing? What about your birth story is coming up right now? Like, what can be held for you with you? What do you need to be seen in? Because the reality of life starts to sink back in at about that third or fourth day. Again, that high of birth is kind of over, and it's easy to feel just so overwhelmed, like overwhelmed by all of it, whether it's the baby and nursing or the fact that your body is so sore and you can barely move. Your screaming toddler is not a fan of this new baby. There are so many variations on this one theme, which is the third or fourth day can be really rough. So, in our training, we go through how to be with women at these different stages and how to prepare them. That would be the first thing before we get to the stage. We have preparation around it. And again, preparation is only so good in a sense. We can prepare, however, we can help women prepare their bodies with really nourishing food. There's nothing worse than being super exhausted with a newborn and also not eating well, or being hungry or having indigestion, right? Our bodies are in between in this early postpartum time. We're not pregnant anymore and we're kind of not we're not our normal selves, so a lot of things are in flux. Literally, our body, mind, and spirit are in flux, and again, speaking to that energy shift. So what can you learn about how to support a woman during that specific time, whether it's 4 days after or maybe it's 4 weeks after? There are different needs, there are different things that come up, there are different things and ceremony, even we can offer at different times to again hold that container. And if I hadn't been holding the container for all of these years, I'd feel less sure about what those things really are, but I'm not. I feel pretty confident that my own 11 postpartum experiences, so I include my late miscarriage because that was a whole different kind of postpartum. That's kind of a rabbit hole, but of course, women that have losses or miscarriages or deaths, they are still going to navigate the postpartum time in some ways the same, in some ways completely differently. So, in my 11 postpartum experiences, I feel really confident with all of the things I got to experience, from the lows of mastitis, and I had mastitis, many more times in my postpartums, unfortunately. I do think some people are just prone to it, but I'm also prone to overdoing it. I know that. From that to, having an unexpected hospital birth the last time with Rumi and navigating that myself, frankly. I had some great postpartum support when Margot was visiting, but when she left, I kind of had to hold my own space in a lot of ways and figure out all of these things again, how to find myself, how to be in this new body, how to deal with 9 other children that needed my attention. So each and every time I have learned about a textbook worth of information for myself, and I think insight into the collective. And again, that's where this course comes in. And that's where perhaps some future postpartum services on my own end come in, because I feel like this is a topic that I'm not only passionate about, but really well schooled in. The Earth School, the school that we all attend here on Earth, has prepared me very well for supporting women during this time. So I love sharing that. And I think even without tons of experience, learning all you can through a course, through reading, through actually supporting women is really, really the way to do it. And it's such a different energy, again, the postpartum, and then also this energy of serving during that time. So I was reflecting this morning on how different it probably is. And I'm learning this as well, or will learn this, how different it is to not be a part of the birth process voluntarily, right? So if you're a postpartum doula, perhaps that's you, where you're offering your support and services clearly for once the baby is here. So you do education, hopefully you do things to get this family ready, but you're not at the birth. And like I said, for me right now, that's feeling like it could be really perfect. So how does that change it? How does that shift it? And although I don't know firsthand quite at the moment, um, by having had, other friends support me over the years that weren't at my births, I think it's a really beautiful opportunity to be fresh energy in this soup, in a sense, of intensity that we know is birth. So, just to be really clear about what I mean, when you're the midwife at a birth or even a doula, you're in the birth energy, right? You're feeling some of the things the mom is feeling. You're there for it. Whether it's great or not so great, there are highs, there are lows. You're in that experience. You're part of that fabric of the birth story. And while there is such beauty in that, and I've said it a million times, I am so honored to have been in the fabric of so many people's birth stories. There's also something that intertwines you, both positive and maybe negative, into the postpartum time. So, giving an example of that, of course, there are births that maybe transport to the hospital, or, aren't quite the home birth that someone has wanted, or maybe someone's labor was 5 days long, right? And if I was the midwife, I'm exhausted too. I wasn't the one that pushed the baby out after 5 days, but it's exhausting to be at long labors. So to be the same person that comes back in 24 hours and provides postpartum care has actually been striking me as somewhat crazy. How did midwives get in this scenario where we do all of the parts and we want to do them all well, but we're also human and we have our own nervous systems to address? We have our own families. We have our own time constraints and stresses. So, in the past, if I was at a really long labor, um, I don't feel like I was able to show up for that same woman for postpartum care with so much energy. That's honest. And, it kind of feels like when you're in that role, you only have so much energy to give. And I think that's honest. And I think that's true about many roles in life. But anyway, that's kind of my reflection lately on how would this be different? Well, the difference is if I wasn't at the 5-day labor, then I get to show up once the baby's there and be fresh energy, to be open ears to this story that I don't know anything about. And I don't have any like ego kind of hold on what happened or what didn't happen. I'm fresh energy for the family, literally, to come into a house and, clean it up postpartum, to wipe down the kitchen, to run a vacuum, to set up the bath for the mom that just had the baby. It is really nice. And I have had this. So, Valerie, if you're listening, thank you for being this person for me last time. To have someone that just kind of comes in, that knows what to do, that is compassionate and loving, can hold space for you, and wasn't at the birth. It is just a really nice feeling. It makes you feel like, wow, there are women around, there are women that care. And my midwife isn't the only one. And best case scenario, in some of these situations where some of us are providing really awesome postpartum support, we're also enabling the midwife to do a better job at her job, right? To show up to the birth in health and vitality, and to leave maybe some of this postpartum care in all its depth and intricacy to someone else. To someone else that knows, that has studied it, that has held space. To me, this sounds really dreamy lately. I don't know about any of you out there. I don't see a lot of comments. So I'd love to hear from you. Like, does this sound amazing? Maybe you're a midwife and you're like, oh my gosh, yes, I would totally hire, really awesome postpartum care for my clients. Or maybe you're a mom that's like, oh my gosh, yes, like I love my midwife, but I know she's busy and she's like going to go on to having another birth tomorrow. And I know I have been in that space way back with my second baby, my first home birth. I didn't get postpartum care. I had mastitis, and we dealt with that by phone because she was already off and running to 3 other births, literally, I think, in the same week my son was born. So there wasn't space and time. And as a new mother, as a mother, a young mother that had just had her second baby, I didn't feel held. I didn't feel supported. I felt really proud of myself that I had had a baby at home, but I didn't get great postpartum care, and I don't have bad feelings about that. This has only taught me what is missing and, what I think so many of us can do to fill this gap, because the midwife cannot do it all. And I've known that for many years. So again, this is a long time coming for me personally to just really want to do this as a course, to do this in supporting all of you out there that want to be this person in your community. And like I said, to possibly fill this role myself, because if not us, who, right? Who's offering this? We don't have our grandmothers in the kitchen anymore, as we may have decades ago. Many of us don't even have our mothers in the kitchen showing up in this way. And if they are, God bless them, but they don't generally know how to really help. And I've heard, so many stories for so many years working with women who have had home births. They're alone, they're unsupported, and even with planning and preparation, usually the postpartum time falls a little short of their expectations. That's been what I've seen over the years. So I'm just gonna look at the comments for a second. If you have any specific questions or topics you want me to blab about for a few minutes, feel free. I'll also post the link to the Mothering the Mother course here before we go. Yeah, I appreciate the comments, and I'm so glad that some of you are already doing this and maybe have had this experience personally. It really is wonderful. There's nothing like being supported in that time, and being supported in maybe a longer term way. And again, I say that as a midwife because we only have so much energy and time. And I've always said to women that I'm working with, I'm always available to you. Like, I'm kind of your midwife forever. So if you have a question uh, a year later, like, let me know, right? I'm into that and can probably answer baby or toddler questions. But I think women need more than that. That's been what I've felt is like I can't be the everything. I don't have time as a midwife to do that. So, not to say that a postpartum doula or even a postpartum midwife can be anyone's everything. That's not realistic either. But I think if we're doing better longer term support and also setting women up to support each other, then it's going to like stretch itself out. And I think the women supporting other women is kind of where this course comes in. You don't have to already be a birth worker. You don't have to have experience really with anything in birth. I think the desire to serve in your heart is the most important thing. And the desire to learn some of the skills you may not have, how to hold space, how to hear a birth story, how to do ceremony, how to facilitate ease in the family as best you can, right? Without being a part of the family. So I think there's so much instinct in all of us as women to serve other women after birth. And I also think there's a lot that we have to learn and a lot we have to remember to be able to effectively hold that space. Because, and I'll blab about this for just a minute, I've seen some really poor postpartum care, right? So some of my clients over the years, I can think of a handful that maybe hired a postpartum doula. And I'm always happy about that. Oh my gosh, great. Thank you. It makes my job easier. Another woman is involved, right? She's going to help out. And only a handful of times can I recall a postpartum doula actually being helpful. And I guess what I'm talking about is some of these women who I don't know where they learned, I don't know what they were trained through. This is a long time ago. I don't even remember their names. They weren't very effective at this space. They maybe thought, or maybe they were trained this way, I don't know, that a postpartum doula just like comes over and, cleans up a little bit and maybe puts a meal in the oven and holds the baby. Um, and that is not effective postpartum care. That's kind of like what postpartum care in its fullest expression is not. Holding a baby is not postpartum care. Of course, there are exceptions. You're a postpartum support person, even the midwife. If a woman wants to get a quick bath or something or shower, that's up to her who holds her baby. But I mean, kind of as a matter of course, like, oh, a postpartum doula, is a baby caretaker. No, that's not to me what a postpartum doula is. And that is not actually helpful for the bonding of mother and baby. And of course, we need to take it back to education because there are many women out there that think that's what they want, right? They don't know. They think postpartum care means baby help because they're overwhelmed and they're not quite sure how to be supported. So, you, as the postpartum person, the postpartum woman, this, wise elder that is in your community, and I say elder in quotes, it's not about age, you're the postpartum wise woman. We must educate women that postpartum support is about rebuilding themselves as women from, the ground up, body, mind, and spirit. This is not about baby holding. So, just to say, I've seen some really poor, in my opinion, postpartum care out in the world. It's ineffective. It's a waste of money and time, and I think it also kind of gives the wrong reputation. We're already in a place in time where we're needing to re-educate and have women remember. And this is a huge topic. There are so many women out there that right now, if you ask them, hey, would you want postpartum care? They would look at you like, what does that even mean? Right? Why would I do that? Is it expensive? Does my insurance cover it? Like, we are culturally just so removed from the inherent need It's actually a need to be supported and taken care of after our baby is here. It's a need, it's not a luxury. Yes, it does require an investment of yourself and probably monetary value, some kind of exchange. I'm not going to be doing this for free, nor would I encourage you to do it other than for friends or family, of course. But this is a real skill in the world and a real need. So those two things should go together, right? You have someone that's skilled and someone that would value and needs the service. That's the way it works. Yeah. So I will post the link to the course, Mothering the Mother, and then I'll get on to blabbing a little bit more. The course is open as of today, and you can check out the details on the page. But it is a self paced course, and that means obviously you're free to do it in a matter of weeks or a matter of months, whatever kind of floats your boat, whatever your ultimate plan is. Maybe you're learning this for yourself. Maybe you're learning this because you want to have a postpartum doula business. I don't know. But it's really flexible in terms of how you go through the course. You are invited to our weekly Doula Academy calls. So we have a Doula Academy that is not focused on postpartum, obviously, but so many of the same issues still come up no matter what phase of the initiation you're working with in the childbearing year. So enrollees of Mothering the Mother are more than welcome to those weekly doula calls. And for the next little bit, I believe till October 1st, there is a slight discount on the program itself. And also, we are throwing in, and this is pretty huge actually, we are throwing in the doula bootcamp business for business. So the doula business bootcamp. And that's a separate course and that will help you get this off the ground in a way that feels fruitful and worth your time and money if you're really looking at making this like an offering, like a financial offering in your community, one that can support you while you're supporting your community. So if you're interested in learning that along with the postpartum mothering the mother, then enrolling before October 1st would be awesome because you'll get that for free. So that's the page. I'm trying to think of what else. Yeah, I can talk a little bit about mental health from my perspective since Anita asked. I think there's always so many ways to talk about these things. So I suppose people here know me well enough that you just get what you get at the moment. That's kind of how I roll. So there's a lot I could say, and I might say differently on a different day about that, about mental health and postpartum. But for today, kind of keeping with this topic, what comes out for me is that there are lots of shifts and changes in our bodies, in our minds, in our hearts, and in our energies. So I want you all to just like feel that for a minute, even if you've never had a baby. Like, just feel what an enormous shift it must be to go from a baby in your body, and the last 9 months have like revolved around that, to having gone through the birth process, who knows what that looked like for you, to this baby being outside your body and your body looking different, feeling different, your emotions, everything is at times unrecognizable. And I never want to like paint postpartum time as disastrous because it's not. It's an opportunity for immense growth. But I think there is a layer of destruction that happens, and that is something we could all be more honest about in the ways that we're able. So, this huge focus on postpartum depression, it's not that it's not real, but all of these like diagnoses really come back to the fact that we are not respectful or supportive of this ridiculous thing that just happened. So again, if you're sitting with that in your body, whether you've had a baby or not, like sitting with that, like women do this all the time. Can you believe it? We've done this for as long as anyone can remember. We've grown people and birthed them and fed them and put ourselves back together sometimes to do it again, right? So just sitting with that and preparing women as best we can with how huge that is and how unknown that is, because we literally don't know what will happen. I mean, we never do in life, right? But it is just wiping the slate clean, wiping your own slate clean when you have a baby. No matter how well it went, no matter what, right? No matter how well supported. So I think, yeah, this overemphasis on mental health is just like our culture, really, that we kind of get fixated on that. That she must be depressed or maybe she's anxious and what medications and is there a mood disorder? And it's like, why don't we just talk about the real stuff? Why don't we prepare women better? And why don't we just hold space for them while they lose it or figure it out? And there are, of course, concrete things that contribute to mental health that we know about, right? So, eating great food and making sure we get even a small amount of rest can have a huge difference. Not having a partner that has to run back to work, right? Like there's so many things that are happening for women that maybe are labeled these things, whatever it is, postpartum depression, postpartum mood disorder, that really are not being supported. So, if that's the answer for those women, that's their business. It's not really mine. I think that's kind of like a band aid culturally for a lot of women. And I'm sure that's offensive to some people. They can do what they want, they can get on the drugs, they can do the things, but did they ever address what was really going on? And my answer, I think, is usually no. That is just kind of glossing over this huge thing that just happened and the support that she is not getting, cannot ask for, whatever it is. So, I think also we can be really specific about the emotions that do come up. And again, we're not all the same. We all have different experiences, but grief, for one, is a postpartum landmark. It has been in my own experience. I've seen it hundreds and hundreds of times. There is often just like a deep grief. And that's another one to just sit with, even if you haven't ever been through this yet in this lifetime. Just sitting with the feeling of grief in your heart. And it doesn't have to make sense mentally. And I think that's again where these things start to like get crossed. Because mentally it doesn't make sense. Why would you be sad? You just had a beautiful birth. You have a beautiful live baby in front of you. It doesn't make sense. But the emotion is there for all of the reasons that we did leave a life behind, right? As a woman that up to now had a certain life experience and now has a baby, whether it's the first one or the 10th one. There is grieving. There is grieving for a past life. There is grieving for the pregnancy. There is grieving for what the birth could have been, what the birth should have been. So again, even in really like normal situations, we can have these extreme emotions. And, again, not to say there aren't other ways to deal, from medication to trauma therapy. There's a billion things out there to possibly support this individual woman better. I don't think it's just a matter of telling her, oh, that'll pass, like that's a normal part of the postpartum, if it's really not feeling normal and she isn't able to move past it and her life is becoming affected and all of that. But truly, in my time as a midwife, I've only seen it a handful of times. And, there may be other times that weren't revealed to me. That's just the truth. But for most of the women I've served, there are normal ups and downs because that's how it is. And they have been the normal ups and downs that have been easy enough in a sense, maybe not for them, but easy enough to support and work through. And usually that kind of thing does pass for sure. So I think, again, to kind of wrap that up, it's it's not a myth. I know it's real. There are so many women having like really awful birth experiences and you know, babies that are harmed at birth. And I mean, we could make a list of all the reasons that someone would be legitimately like mentally unwell after their birth. I think that is very real. But I guess in more of this paradigm that I want to be creating, I think we have to take it with a grain of salt and kind of orchestrate all of the ways we know to support and listen to a woman before we jump to that conclusion. That's all. So I'll leave it at that. Let me see if there are any more comments. Yeah, if anybody has anything else, let me know here in the last few minutes. I am thinking about and probably going to have an in-person training for postpartum support here in Hawaii. So if any of you are interested in that, just stay tuned or send me an email. I'll make sure you get on the list. But I'm planning that to be in February here. So, especially if you're in some cold, wintry place, by February, you might be into a trip to tropical paradise. And I would so invite you here to learn hands on skills with me. I am so excited about teaching this, and I'll let you know more details. But it would basically be 2 days. So, like an in person workshop with cooking and ceremony and all of the things that I can pack in to those hours to really give you like hands-on experience, almost like apprenticeship training in the postpartum time. Using information, using the tools we have here. We obviously like won't be traipsing around, going to people's homes and actually doing postpartum care for them, but we will talk about it and get people set up to feel confident with some of the hands-on things and bring that to their community. So stay tuned for that. It'll be, here on Oahu in February. And I know at least a handful of people I've mentioned it to. We're really excited to consider doing that. And that's open to anyone. So if you're, again, a mom or someone that might have babies in the future, that might be really fun. And if you're someone that just wants to like expand your skill set as a doula, or even a midwife. I think if midwives were humble enough to come to something like this, they'd probably learn a lot. I feel like I've learned so much over the years, of course, from the women I've served and my own life. So I'm happy to share that in person, and I think that'll be such a nice change from the online setting where most of us live most of the time. All right, I'll leave it for another like 30 seconds here and see if anybody has any last questions or thoughts. And you can check out the page. If you're listening, it's indiebirth.org/mothering the mother. And I will have that in the podcast notes as well. To recap, that training is open right now. It will remain open, but until October 1st, there is an incentive to do it. So we have a slight price reduction in our course right now. And remember, you get the business course for doulas if you register before October 1st. And that will help you, hopefully, if you would like to, set up your postpartum doula business as, an actual functioning business that enables you to offer that in your community in a way that also feels really great to you and provides for you and your family, which is so important. And I don't think we should ever ignore in this day and age. All right, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with me. I know it's kind of late for some of you. Check out the Mothering the Mother page, and I'll see you back here soon, perhaps next weekend with another live podcast. Goodbye, everybody.